Good Sunday morning. So, yes, we've got Mercury stationing literally as we speak and going retrograde. It's literally stopped in the sky right now and about to go retrograde. It actually technically goes a retrograde at about 11:01:25. That's what they got it timed to on Pacific time. So if you're somewhere else, on the East Coast, Midwest, whatever, add your time zones, but very powerful. Mercury does this 3 times a year. This is not the end of the world. A lot of people predict the end of the world on every Mercury retrograde. I mean, it's just a part of life. And what I like about it is, can we use this in a positive way? And the answer is yes. This is a time when, check your brakes, your tires, back up your data, rethink. It's also a great time to refocus intellectual projects that you might be working on. Like go back to the drawing board or, something that wasn't working. If you're a writer or someone who's working on whatever project you're working on, it's actually a great time. Again, I always liken it to the wind. If you ever sailed a boat and the wind changes directions, well, you kind of want to angle that sail. Well, it's the same idea. You go with the flow. And this is a time where we can rethink, rework, retrace, and also repair. So, it's a time to drive a lot more carefully. Now, I said on the thumbnail that this Mercury retrograde packs a lot of punch, and it does. And the reason being is Mercury not only is going retrograde, which it always does, but it 3 times a year, it's going to go back and make a conjunction to Mars. And it actually does this 4 times. Technically, I went back. It's actually doing it 5 times because it already did so just a while back. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, but I didn't write that down. But Mercury retrogrades and goes into the conjunction of Mars on November 12th. Now, you might say, okay, great. What does it mean? Well, very, very powerful. Mars is always a planet of war. It's also a planet of action and planet of intense egos. So be exceedingly careful driving, because depending on where this is in your chart, it can be very positive and it can be all points in between to negative, and absolutely dangerous if it's squaring, conjuncting, or making some hard aspects in your chart. Now, the only way you're going to know that is either to get a way to look at your chart and the transiting aspects to it. But very, very powerful. And I know other astrologers have programs out there that they're doing that. So take advantage of that if you can. And of course, if you're getting a reading from me or someone else, look into that. And a lot of people today, I encourage to get astrology programs. They're cheap and you can track your own stuff. It's really kind of fun. It's astronomy to you. And, it's quite interesting. So Mercury will go into and cross over that Mars on the 12th. Now it's going to go through the eye of the sun, and that's called combustion. And that's right on the 19th of this month. What does that mean? Well, see, Mercury sets after the sun. It's called occidental. In fact, here, I can actually show you that. This is kind of cool. You can see it on an astrology program here. So let me see if I can't share the old screen here for you. There we go. Just take just a second here for me to get over there. And you'll see what I'm talking about. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put up my program here. Now, you're going to notice this looks like Swahili, but it's actually pretty simple. We're going to be, and a lot of people complain that, geez, I can't see this thing, right? And I'm always like, well, that's because, you really have to, here, hang on, something went down. I use a program here that let me just see what's going on here. Anyways, I don't know what happened there, but so I'm not going to be able to circle things here. Hang on a second if we can do that. Sorry about this. What I want to do is I use Zoom also because it allows me to get a pointer here. Damn it. I don't like it when that happens. Anyways, what I'll do is I'll just use my cursor. Otherwise, this is going to take all day. So you can see my cursor. It's very, very hard to see, but what's going on here is Mercury is stationing in the 13th degree. It's right up here at the top of the chart. And we're only looking at this circle right here. So what's interesting about this here and there, this is today's date. So Mercury sets after the sun, and what that means is it's occidental. And plain English is this is the most dangerous time of Mercury retrograde. And that's the point I wanted to make. So when Mercury retrogrades, it's going backwards into the light of the sun. And I got to tell you, Mercury is an interesting planet. A lot of things I don't hear a lot of people address in astrology is Mercury is very mysterious. You know that it takes 88 years for Mercury to go around the sun. That's pretty amazing when you think about it. So it's really slow. Remember, we go around the sun every 365 days. So this is really quite phenomenal stuff here when you talk about. I'm just not going to share until I get the other system back up. So think about that. 88 years it takes. I couldn't believe it. I looked into the astronomy on that and I went, wow, that's quite fascinating. So it's very slow. Well, Mercury, when people say it goes retrograde, that's a term that means it appears to go backwards. Well, we know the planets don't go backwards, right? And here I have a little model of that you can actually see here. See, if you look at this here, this is kind of the concept. So we are this blue planet, obviously, and Mercury appears to go backwards 3 times a year because of our speed going around it. So it's like two vehicles on the freeway. One's doing 55, and the other one's doing 60. It's going to look from the person doing 60 like the one doing 55 is going backwards, when yet both are traversing forward down the freeway. So that's the concept of Mercury retrograde. And a lot of astronomers laugh at Mercury retrograde. It's like, how can you say that has any effect on Earth? Well, you got to remember, we don't live on the sun. We live on the Earth. And what's interesting, geocentric astrology is simply meaning the Earth. It's affecting us at where we're at. And I cannot tell you the stories and my own personal experiences over the years of what I've seen, heard, and experienced with Mercury retrograde. And I've also found if you get in tune with it, it can really be to your advantage. And that's what I encourage. Drive careful. Be more aware, look twice when you go through intersections. I would like to look back and forth at least 2 or 3 times, especially on a motorcycle. You don't fare too well when you mix with cars on motorcycles. So I'm really careful about that. And we should be in cars anyhow. I mean, I'll tell you something I wanted to mention too. Last podcast, we went into all kinds of things about herbs and doctors and all kinds of things. And I wanted to mention something. I've got a lot of doctors who are clients and friends. And let me tell you, they are some really ingenious people. And when it comes to surgeries and trauma, they can do some miraculous things. And I have seen incredible breakthroughs come through with surgeries. My brother just told me a friend had to have a stent in his heart. And the doctor was able to put it into his heart from his wrist. He just slit his wrist and went up in there and put it in. So, and that guy's drawing breath right now. And I've seen people in accidents where these paramedics and these doctors, they can really save lives. So I want to be careful that, we don't just damn allopathic medicine wholesale. Yeah, there's a few, areas and diseases and such, but the science is solid, and there's a lot of miraculous stuff that goes on, and it's going to keep going on. I think it's going to get like, if you remember Star Wars, remember when Luke Skywalker got his hand cut off and they put a whole new hand on? Well, we're coming to that, I think, in a not too short of an order. We're going to see that potentially within our lifetimes. And we're already beginning to see things that are helping people. I have a guest that I'm going to have on, really amazing lady. I did a reading with her yesterday. Dana Bless. She's a doctor who is a psychologist, and she helps people. We're going to have her on very soon. And she does some amazing things with these staffs of doctors and specialists who are helping people who can't walk, see, talk. They're really challenged physically. So I just wanted to mention that. And again, this is, kind of back to Mercury retrograde. I did a jump there, but one of the reasons I bring that up is this is a time to rethink, retrace, and rework. And it also can apply to your health too. It's a good time to really look into things that you've been overlooking. Because remember, not only do we have vehicles and cars, we got another vehicle. It's the one we're staring out of, which is our bodies. And it's really important to be aware of that. And again, as much as I like reflexology, and I want to make another comment, somebody was saying, oh, I'm selling reflexology machines. No, I'm not. I don't get a dime for that. In fact, I don't even know the companies that sell these things. I just suggest it because I have found it is a miraculous healing device. And for me, it really has been. And many other people too. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't see a doctor, if you got an issue. Because again, like I say, I've met some doctors who are pretty smart. I've also met some that have been a little bit disappointing. But there's some real geniuses out there. And the advancement in science has really been impressive, in my opinion. So I just wanted to bring that up because I don't want people to think, oh, don't see a doctor, or surgeries aren't, helpful sometimes. Sometimes they are. We want to avoid them, that's for sure. I know I do, but I'm trying to die with all my body parts if I can. But again, don't write off some of these specialists. They're really incredible. Anyways, I wanted to go back to what Mercury is going to do. So Mercury is not only going to hit Mars. Okay, now look at the world right now. A lot of tensions going on. We're hearing a lot of things. Of course, look at the politics in the United States, not to get into politics, but we just had a lot of things go on with an election. Plus, we're still in the longest shutdown in history. And that's pretty wild. And I got to tell you that, I looked at an interrogation and I didn't have a lot of time to study it. And I want to do that again. Give me just a second here. And the question is will it get back up and running? And if so, when and how soon? Well, timing is hard to get, but I got to tell you, I think it's going to probably happen relatively soon. In fact, I hear they're pulling a vote on this today. And I think if they don't, what I do like, and that's relatable to this Mercury retrograde, is I think there's going to be a lot of fighting and a lot of arguing, which we know that that's the case. Welcome to politics, right? But what's interesting is when I cast the chart using what we call prashna, which is sidereal astrology, and the Lord of the 10th is the government. And what's it doing? It's going to a conjunction of Mars, Lord of the Ascendant. And plain English is very likely that there's going to be a lot of push here. And if they don't open it soon, I think they will go nuclear. But I wouldn't be surprised, based on all the aspects I'm seeing here, that we will see a resolution of this fairly soon. When? Timing's hard to get, but it could be over the next week, and maybe even as soon as 3 days. So let's hope it happens today. But what is positive is the chart's not saying it won't open soon. It says it will. So I think we're on the downhill side of the shutdown. And of course, we're hearing more and more of the flights being, percentages of flights are being canceled. I hear they're going to go up to 20% if they don't open it soon. And there's a lot of other things that are going on too with that whole shutdown. And this rabbit hole goes steep. And this Mercury retrograde is very relatable to that. This is a time when a lot of things that are broken can get fixed, or we can get a lot of turmoil here that causes it to get fixed. So yeah, and by the way, by the 19th of this month, Mercury goes into the eye of the sun. Also, it's going to station and go direct right at the end of the month, which is the November 30th. Now, I want to also talk about something else that's going on. In sidereal astrology, we've got a Jupiter-Saturn trine from the water trine, meaning Jupiter's in Cancer and Saturn is over in Pisces. And this is an interesting phenomenon here because Jupiter actually stations and goes retrograde on the 11th, which is just 2 days from now, right? So, and that does it about, I think it's around 8 something p.m. on the 11th. And what does that mean? Well, when Jupiter stations, this trine to Saturn comes with really close. I think it's within 9 minutes of arc. See, 1 degree is always considered very strong in astrology. And each degree, you can break it up into 3 segments. 15 degrees is 1/3, sorry, 1/4. 30 is a half, and 45 is, of course, the 3/4 mark. So 9 minutes of arc of trine is really, really powerful. So this sustains here. And what does this all mean? Well, that's actually a fairly positive energy. I really like Jupiter and Saturn because the sun is also trining it. And that's going to go on over the next 7.5 days or 8 days. So in general, this is powerful. And Mercury's got a lot of punch when it hits Mars, but there's a lot of good that could come out of this. And we'll see where it all goes. Again, if we take this up to 100,000 feet and look down, you got to remember we still have Mercury is going to come back and give Mars a kiss again, right at November 17th. So that's very, very powerful. So Mars actually and Mercury join 4 times. The first time is on the 12th of November, which is right after Jupiter goes retrograde, comes back, hits it again on the 17th, because you've got to remember it's going backwards into Mars and then forward into Mars. Then it does it again because Mercury goes retrograde again, right in February, coming up in 2026. Mercury leapfrogs retrograde 3 times a year, and it always brings major changes. And of course, this next one will be in March, and it's going to hit Mars again. And then it does it again finally in April. Now, that one's going to be much more dangerous. We'll be talking about that in the future. And the reason why is that one is both the February and the March ones got me much more concerned, only because that's the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And also, we've got a Mars-Saturn conjunction, war. And remember, I've been saying, Uranus, if you look at the big picture, Uranus, every 84 years, goes through the Pleiades, and it's doing so. Uranus is retrograde right now, but it's going to station and go direct. And when it does, it is, I think Uranus goes direct. I don't know. I don't have it written down right here. But when it goes direct, it's going to come back over Alcyon. And that happens this May. Well, what happens every time Uranus does this, every 84 to 86 years? We get lots of trouble in the world. The last time was World War II. Time before that was the Civil War. Time before that was, of course, the Revolutionary War. And if we keep going back through Europe, all kinds of different wars and plagues and so on and so forth had been shown up in dissension in the world, even if Uranus wasn't discovered. So this is a dicey time. And I've been saying this, the owners at the top of the pyramid, they want war. And they don't like Orange Man, let me tell you. They want to stop what's going on. So we always have this war of good and evil. But what's interesting is how Uranus seems to mix that up even more. And again, I mentioned last podcast, there's been a whole bunch of reports of UAP, UFOs, or whatever you want to call them, activity in these underground bases off the coasts. And there have been a lot of sightings. So pretty interesting stuff here that's going on. And it's very interesting. This world, I think, has been protected from destruction ever since the nuclear age. I really do. And that's actually been reported by various people in the military. In fact, it was Admiral Byrd who did the expedition down to Antarctica, which that's another whole subject, pretty interesting. You know, the ice walls and the openings underneath Antarctica. And he was actually told by beings believed to be in crystal cities that if you ever launch a major nuclear war, we will stop it. And whether you believe in UAPs, UFOs, I can tell you, I've seen them. I've had my vehicles stopped and missing time and so on and so forth. There's a lot of stuff. And this might bring some of that disclosure coming up in February as this Saturn-Neptune conjuncts for the first time in the very first degree of tropical areas. So it's a very, very powerful time. So, yeah, and I got to say also, too, that the degree that Mercury is in right now, as we speak, is in the 13th degree of sidereal Scorpio. Now, if for those who are technical, if you got computer programs, you'll notice in the sidereal zodiac, Mercury right now, as we speak, is at 12 degrees Scorpio, 38 minutes, and it's just eking to a stop. In fact, it actually goes in just, it's what, 10:30 something right now. So it's right around the corner. Yeah, we're at 10:50. So it's going to happen like in 12 minutes and thereabouts. And what's interesting about this is there are angelic forces in every single degree. And this, I looked this up in the sidereal zodiac. This is actually happening in the 13th degree. See, we round up from 0 to 1 is the first degree, and from 12 to 13 is the 13th degree. This is a very powerful degree. It's called the degree of reveries or the angelic force. It's a mediumistic, psychic, and intuitive degree, but it also brings a lot of sensitivity and emotions. And well, you talk about politics and where the world is right now with all the stuff going on with, the dissension that we're hearing about, the flooding of the borders all over the world, Europe, Australia, various different places, the tensions in Taiwan. We never hear much about Russia and Ukraine, but that's still going on. A lot of mysteries to that one. I won't get into that on a podcast, but interesting stuff, because this is likely to exacerbate a lot of hidden, subconscious, deep things within us. And, that's a really interesting topic, because I find, the whole game here on planet Earth is the mind. It's all about the mind. And it's very, very interesting stuff. I finally got my computer working right now, so I can go back and I can do that screen share that we were talking about. So let me do that. And I can kind of show you what I was talking about, and and we'll just take a second here and kind of go over that Mercury retrograde concept. And again, now we can do it. So you can see here, I'm back to this program, and what I wanted before was my little pen, because the little pen here really helps circle this, because a lot of people have complained that this is too small. And I'm going to start going back to more pre-recorded videos too, not just all these lives, because I'll be able to do that here over the holiday season. And I might have somebody back online here too that you haven't heard of for a while. But anyhow, Mercury, you can see, is right here. And you can see if we draw between here and the sun, if you rotate around, see, this is the eastern horizon in this type of a chart. This is the midheaven up here. This is noon, and this is sunset over here. You see, so it's all astronomy. So if you rotate this around, which I will do here, I'll just show you if I take and go in to the hour increments, and you'll notice that when the sun goes over the horizon, Mercury is behind it. That's called occidental. That's the first phase of Mercury retrograde. So, and Mercury will go backwards into the sun. It will cross over the sun. In fact, I'll demonstrate that for you. See, now I'm going in daily increments now. If anybody's got enough resolution on a big screen, you'll see way up here, this is a time tool way at the top of that screen on the upper right. And I always say God created time, so everything wouldn't happen at once, right? And really, astrology is astronomy, and it's the science of time. Well, watch. If I keep going, you're going to notice, just like I said, that right about the 19th of November, the Mercury will jump on the other side of the sun. Now, if you can see this, I know it's very small, but you can see right there, Mercury jumped on the opposite side of the sun. What does that mean? Well, that's called combustion. When a planet goes into the eye of the sun, it's a very interesting phenomenon, because it tends to really have an intensified effect of good, even during Mercury retrograde. And that will happen right on the 19th. We'll talk about that as we get closer, but on those details, we'll be here all day. But the bottom line is, now Mercury becomes what astrologers call Oriental. Well, what does that mean? Well, Oriental, watch, if I come around here and I just go in hourly increments, see, every hour, the ascendants are constantly, every 2 hours, actually, the ascendants are constantly changing. Well, watch. Notice Mercury now rises before the sun. See, because this eastern horizon over here is the ascendant. You see, the ascendant is the eastern horizon. It's where spirit manifests. Very interesting. And watch as I go forward in hourly increments. You can see Mercury will go above the horizon and the sun follows it. And that's when Mercury's getting ready to station and go direct. So that's kind of the astrological or astronomical mechanics, if you will, of Mercury retrograde. Now, it's going to affect everybody different, but as a whole, it affects everybody insofar as its energy. Mercury rules communications, contracts, logic, thinking, vehicles, all kinds of things, computers. It's very interesting, the phenomena behind this. And even the staunchest skeptics have that I've spoken to have said, well, there is maybe something to that. That is when something happened or whatever it was. So it's very interesting because, again, if I come over here and we use this little model that I talk about a lot, you can actually see here Mercury rules reason and logic and intellect, you see? And again, all of these glyphs of the planets come from three symbols: the circle, which is the sun, which is the portal, the crescent, which is the moon. And notice Mercury is the crescent of the moon over the sun, over the cross. You can see that right here, you see? So again, Mercury was also known in the ancient lore as the Mercury, the winged messenger, right? So, and also to those Hermetic astrologers, Mercury was always considered to be Hermes Trismegistus. So very, very interesting stuff about that. And it rules logic. And that's why Mercury in some ways is also the nervous system. And I found a lot of folks who are having problems with outer transits. We can see sometimes areas in the nervous system get a little bit cross-wired sometimes when you have hard aspects to Mercury. And positive ones always bring an expansion of knowledge and growth. So it's very interesting to understand these undulations and waves of energy, because that's exactly what it is. I want to bring something up here that that's kind of interesting. And I've mentioned many times this text. It's called the Sefer Yetzirah. And, why would I mention that? Well, Yetzirah is a strange word in Aramaic and Hebrew that actually means formation. And this gets into this whole genre of consciousness, good, evil, and who are we? What are we doing here? So, and the earth, I always say, is the soul cauldron. It is literally where spirit manifests. And I think there's just one of many planets that do that. And I'm going to go back here and I'm going to show this screen one more time since we're at it here and I've got it to work. So you can see here. Now, there we go. So now I'm going to jump back to my diagram that I use quite frequently, which is the one that looks at the general models of creation. Again, unless you're an atheist, no matter what, you refer to as divinity, God, we'll just say it's definitely the divine creative forces. Well, you can see here, as we go down, they say souls are created right here. Well, the worlds of Yetzirah are the formation of the universes, the multiverses is what they would say. Now, why am I bringing this all up? With Mercury retrograde? Well, there's an interesting analogy here when we get into energy to physics and acoustics and light. And what you find here is everything in the material worlds is built up of energy, positive and negative forces, right? In fact, if you look at the solar system itself, what is it? It is like a giant atom in some ways, more simplistic than many atoms, but it's somewhat similar. And you can see here, like if you just look at here, there's one model here, so you can actually see this right here. See, it's like a big atom. If you treated the sun as the nucleus, right, or the positive charges, and the planets as the opposing charges, or the modulators, that's one way of looking at it. But I can certainly say what it appears to be, in my opinion, is a place where spirit manifests. And why I bring this up is because the planets act, in my opinion, like portals to our consciousness. Back in the 80s, I had a chance, I worked at a place teaching some classes at Riverbank Acoustics Laboratory. This is in Batavia, Illinois. Really interesting. It was actually built by Colonel Fabian, who was born just after the Civil War. And what he built this laboratory for was a man you may or may not have heard of. His name was Wallace Clement Sabin. And Sabin was an amazing man. In fact, if anybody's ever been to New York and to the Carnegie Hall, he's the guy who actually designed Carnegie Hall for Carnegie. And of course, that was donated to New York, and one of the most famous concert halls in the world. And the reason why was all about energy and how energy reflected from the sound of the people playing. They're saying it's one of the few concert halls in the world you could just sit in there and you don't even need amplification. I mean, you could hear singers and orchestras and plays. It's just amazing. And we actually went in there and did a study back in the 80s of the acoustics that Sabin had done. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, this kind of relates to us as resonant beings and our astrological impacts. But remember, resonance is the real key. And one of the things that they talk about in acoustics, and we used to do a lot of cool stuff. This was actually the control room of Riverbank's Acoustics Laboratories. They have all these chambers that they put everything you can think of, lawnmowers, submarine engines, you name it. They crane all this stuff down in there, and they do testing on how loud it is. And they also test, most importantly, building materials, how much it absorbs and how much transmits through. This all gets put out to architects. It's really fascinating. That's how I ended up coming to Los Angeles, was doing acoustical work and electronic design work for stuff like this. A lot of fun. But why I bring that up is it's such a parallel to consciousness and energy. And this gets back into this book, the Sefer Yetzirah, which talks about the cube of six and also space, time and space. And many physicists have talked about this. But what's in the middle of all this is you, which is consciousness. So the astrology shows that we literally have these energy fields called planets going around us, and stars and yogas and all these different things that go on in both Vedic astrology, Nadi astrology. A lot of people talk about Vedic astrology, but Nadi astrology and some of the older stuff that's hidden in ancient Vedic astrology is absolutely stunning, absolutely stunning. And I've been blessed to study with some of these older guys who've now passed away, and there's secrets upon secrets that different astrologers have, and they don't seem to share it with each other. And it's really, really quite fascinating when you look into it all. And that's why we'll never figure it all out, but it's all about energy. And if you study acoustics and physics, you find how miraculous it is that sound and light, just those two elements alone, or phenomena alone, are kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. And we don't think about that stuff much because we just live our lives, right, in our perception of reality. Well, why I bring all this up is we're going to be talking in the future about Krishnamurti and other people who get you to analyze your consciousness. This is why I really do like psychology, psychiatry, and the paranormal or parapsychology especially. And again, this is why we came to the planet Earth, is to dissipate the karmas, if you will, that we all have impinging upon us. And that's why, I say God created time so everything would happen at once, because if you study astrology, it's all about timing. But there's one thing that a lot of astrologers leave out. That is reaction. Reaction is the most powerful thing in the universe. And it's not easy to react sometimes. Let me tell you, I get knocked on my butt sometimes from different angles of life, like we all do, right? And even if you are examining astrology, you're going to find you're not going to get rid of it. It's like driving a car. You're not going to stop the guy who just ran the stop sign. You can get mad at him, but you're not going to stop him, right? And you certainly don't want to either, because that means it's called an accident, right? But what we want to do is react more intelligently. And some things are really challenging. Again, I mentioned this lady I had a reading with yesterday, and some of these poor people who are born deformed, blind, they can't speak, etc. And again, we did a wonderful podcast, I think it was last year, with autistic children being looked at. And we had this lady on who was basically saying the spelling to speech, her son was psychic. He could talk to animals and he could read people's minds. And people think, oh, they're challenged, right? Well, maybe we are. That's because we're living in a reality structure. And this brings me back to the whole principle of your mind, because astrology affects us energetically in time. But there's one thing in the middle, and that's us. And that us is separate from the body. It's separate also from the astrology. And that's something that's not looked at. In fact, the world goes out of its way to suppress that continuously. Stand up, sit down. We're told this from little children forward, to suppress the human magical ability to access our intuition, our psychic ability, our, you could say, ability to get out of our lower, response patterns and start looking at what can we do? Like everybody says, oh, we all hate war, right? But everybody's doing war. We're building bigger and better and stronger bombs to find new and unique ways to kill people, right? And this is always, and Hollywood reinforces it, all the movies, the books, everything. But what's interesting is you leave this body. If you stay in this lower state of consciousness, you're very likely to be in the old saying, stiff-necked in this world, you're going to be stiff-necked in the next. So it's really cool stuff to look at that. And why I brought up the acoustics is it's very parallel to what the Sefer Yetzirah talks about. It talks about time and space and the way energy reacts within it. And what's interesting is energy can be likened to karma. And this is what, I really liked about quote unquote Jyotisha or Vedic astrologies, the nickname for it. But it's really an analysis of who we are in juxtaposition of what's happening to us in time and space. Because time and space, many of the yogis in India will tell you, oh, the whole physical world's an illusion, right? And I always say, well, drop a prick on your foot and call me on the first of the month. It's not an illusion. But they're right, because we all, like Shakespeare said, are playing a movie, and the earth is the stage. And it's interesting how the eclipse points of Rahu and Ketu seem to be the entrance and exit of the theater, or at least it depicts a large portion of the movie we're playing and then what we get out of it in the aftermath of the movie. And that may be why, movies have such an impact on us. It actually shapes society incredibly. And I was just watching a wonderful thing about the power of film yesterday. One of the professors at UCLA was putting on a documentary. It's absolutely amazing, and talks about the psychic impact of films and memories and connections to our families and all this emotional stuff that we all have. And this is so interesting how, this Mercury retrograde actually relates to that, because it's retrograding in the degree of sympathetic vibration and psychic energies. So depending on where your psychic vibration is, it's likely to have a big resonance this time. So it packs a lot of punch. Plus it's going into Mars. So we're going to see a lot of emotions, a lot of people very reactive on this. And again, you look at the world and there's nothing new. It's always happening. But I think this might exacerbate that within ourselves, which can be very positive if you're analyzing yourself in a positive way. So anyways, some people are making some great comments here, and I wanted to respond a little bit to these. I'm just kind of reading it over. A lot of people are having inner conversations here, which is good. But a lot of people say you are God. Well, we certainly seem to be a piece of it. I'll certainly say that. And that's another thing a lot of people have said, in many different religions and belief systems. But there's a lot of great comments here. I'm going to make this one a bit short today because, again, I've got to go. But a lot of great comments here. Let me just see if I can grab one here. What's so interesting about, I think, where the world is going right now, and I'm just kind of scanning over most of the comments here, and a lot of people are commenting about, experience on Earth and consciousness and all that stuff. And it's such a big topic because astrology really fits into that. if we get away from the superstition of astrology, predicting the future and all that, the only reason interrogation works is because people are fairly fixed in their trajectory. Like, for instance, take lawsuits. When you get somebody mad at somebody and they want to sue somebody, that is like a machine that just keeps rolling. It's like a car or a truck. It has inertia and it just can't stop. You say, well, it can, but most people don't stop because they're locked into their belief and conscious direction that they're going. And it's very powerful stuff. So this is why, we see so much conflict in the world, is because people often do not analyze their own actions to the degree where they question them. And it's good to have goals, and it's good to be very driven. But a lot of times we get in trajectories that we ought to at least reconsider. And again, what is Mercury retrograde? Retracing, rethinking, reconsidering, you see. And with Mars hitting it this 4 times between now and this spring, very powerful time. This is a very powerful time we're entering into, because Uranus is stirring the pot at the top of the pyramid over the Pleiades. And the Pleiades are very interesting star groups, and they've been connected to a lot of ancient lore that I find is really accurate in the world. So, yeah, a lot of people are making some great comments here, and thank you for your kind comments here. But I did want to bring that up that I talked about earlier about, medicine, because again, I've had some doctors as clients. I mean, they're stunning, some of the stuff they're doing. I have one client who he does robotic surgery for the military, and they are doing stuff through the internet across the world, microsurgeries that no human hand could do. It's absolutely phenomenal. And again, I've talked to doctors who are analyzing the pineal gland, and they're angry because of the fluoride in the water, and they're seeing the calcification of the pineal glands. So, science, science has brought us a lot. And, I would say the reflexology and the herbs are great, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You got to look at the whole picture. So, and you got to be very careful with that, because, there's been some pharmaceuticals that cause a lot of trouble, but there's also been some that have saved lives too. So you got to be very careful. And I always say, check with a lot of different people. It's like you're going to find good and bad in every element of life, good and evil, right? It's always there. So something to be aware of, because, I've seen some pretty smart people in the medical fields too, especially in some of the new specialized fields that are pretty wild. Anyways, so someone's saying, this is a good one. Someone's saying here, will there ever truly be peace on Earth? Well, I don't know that I can answer that, but I think that peace is inside. I really do. When we look out to the world's always doing what the world's doing. And the yugas do say we come into periods of enlightenment, like particularly one that's going to come to us, I think, is when we hit this galactic center, which is about, from most people's perspective, about 11,500 AD. Now, we're going to actually hit these ages sooner that are much more enlightened. But I think this, whole good and evil, that gets back into the Sefer Yetzirah, the one I mentioned earlier. And I really have to say, that's a great comment that person brought up. Let me share my screen one more time. And I want to show you something that, again, is just something to ponder here. And when you look at this diagram, which again is a diagram that I've been putting together for about the last 40 years, this big, thick dashed line here, which again is the demarcation between the so-called upper enlightened heavens and the material worlds. See, they actually claim there could be 49 parallel universes. I can't balance my checkbook, let alone even fathom that. We haven't even understood the universe we're in, let alone the world we're in. There's still dispute about the earth in so many ways, right? And all the beings that are here. What's interesting is that the stories in the ancient biblical texts, particularly the Garden of Eden story, the Bhagavad Gita, and many other texts all talk about this war in heaven, where God got ticked off and cast down the evil spirits. And this is not just a Western story. This is found in many ancient texts, particularly the Vedas. And what they say is that the evil spirits are incarcerated right at the material creational levels. And that's why they say everything beneath the heavens will be born, it will grow, it will mature, it will atrophy, and it will pass away. In fact, many scientists will tell you their opinion is the universe is somewhere between 4.3 and 4.6 billion years old. No one knows. Give them a little slide there, 0.3 billion years. That's not bad. So if that's the case, that's exactly what the Vedas say. They say creation, or what we call the material worlds, is destroyed about every 4.3 approximate billion years and recreated. Now, we hear the Big Bang Theory, the contraction theory, all these different things in physics. Is it true? I think it is. And that's a long time, 4.3 to 4.6 billion years. You could live a few lifetimes in that one, couldn't you? So the point is that it really seems to be that good and evil, I think anywhere you'd go in the multiverses probably have some elements of good and evil. And what's interesting is spirit and consciousness is outside of that time realm. Now, I also think there might be a time realm on that. There's certain texts that talk about some angels can live many, 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 many thousands of years, and no one really knows. I certainly don't. But there's theories that these upper angels may exist an infinite amount of time, whatever that is, I don't know. They say some angels in the lower realms do not exist as long. They may be combinations, again, of good and evil. If anyone ever studies Exodus, that is one of the most encrypted magical documents in a sacred way that you ever. It's called the Goetic demonic forces and angelic forces of the 72 angels that are encrypted in 3 verses in Exodus. Absolutely amazing. And many people have heard of the greater keys of Solomon and the lesser keys of Solomon. Of course, King Solomon, there's a lot of lore about him with spirits and demons accosting him and all this stuff. So it's pretty deep stuff. So where I'm going with this is that the realms, and I don't think it's just Earth, that good and evil, we tend to be intermixed in the genetic sense with the seeds of destruction and creation at the same time. And, science, to its credit, is always working. And of course, we hear about herbs and reflexology. We're all working to keep in front of that steamroller called death, right? And rightly so. Who wants to die, right? So we all want to keep moving on. But here's what's interesting. The biggest focus should be on consciousness. Because this thing, yeah, you want to take care of your body. Yes, you want to stay healthy. But the biggest thing that we want to keep healthy is the lower conscious mind, known as the nefesh. And I got to tell you, the Sharia Gilgum, which is the gates of reincarnation, which is a very interesting text, talks about how the lower conscious mind can only come from souls trapped down into the lower astral worlds of Asaya. Now, many Buddhists, many Vedantics, many Christians, Christian Science is interesting stuff too, let me tell you. And what's interesting about all of this, and that's some of the messages in Sermon on the Mount, in the Upanishads, and so many other great texts that are incredibly enlightening. And the Sharia Gilgum has a statement that once consciousness becomes what they call self-aware is one term, or the karmic dissipations have happened, that a soul or angel from the upper realms comes in and fishes us out of these lower incarnational realms, and we move up. Now, God only knows, and I'm not going to claim I know, but it's inferred that we go to other worlds and or we go up into the wisdom of the soul, which is known as the worlds of Braya. And you can actually see here, see if I can actually bring this in just a little bit because this is hard to see. But you can actually see the bondages of the soul seem to be happening in the physical worlds called Yetzirah. That's what the Sefer Yetzirah talks about, is the elements of space and time. And notice up here, the worlds of Braya, which is these very complex, again, 49 dimensions, 49 subdimensions in these heavens. of Hokmah. Hokmah is a strange word that simply means the wisdom of the soul, where we just might remember all these past lives. And time and space, many people have heard of the Akashic records. Well, here you go. So when you start really delving into these different texts, they all say kind of the same thing, just in different ways, and they use different nomenclature and vernacular, which is very interesting stuff. So lots of stuff here. It's beyond human comprehension. It's definitely beyond mine, but it's fun to be able to talk about this stuff using diagrams like this. And see, that's the value of a diagram of this nature, is it allows us to at least look at something that we can wrap our finite minds around. Otherwise, it just becomes someone talking. And this has always been, to me, one of the more favorable ways of talking about something that's almost incomprehensible. And it at least divides it into dimensional ways and names. And this is not something I made up. Believe me, this is in the Sharia Gilgam. Absolute is the upper levels of the soul. Braya is the wisdom of the soul. Yetzirah is the bondages of karma, by the way, which is ruled in this world by Saturn, the cross over the crescent of the moon. Time, it's where time starts. Time is not an illusion. But what's interesting is when you look at the earth itself and the moon, it is a time machine. You know, every day we see sunrise on the eastern horizon. We see noon, we see sunset, and we see midnight. That nobody can deny that one, right? you figure out a way around that one. Let me know. Not on this planet. So, and we also have the lunations, which is the new and full moons and the quarters. By the way, we're coming into the 3/4, right? We just had our full moon. So powerful, powerful stuff. And what's interesting about it is time is relative to this genetic time-space continuum known as Earth. And I believe a lot of these beings that come in and out of here are probably in different time-space continuums. And some of them may be a mixture of demonic and angelic beings as well. This gets into some really deep stuff. The Keys of Enoch talks about this, and many other texts talk about this. It's very hard to unravel this mysterious thing. But Linda Moulton Hall, I got to see her at Contact in the Desert last summer. I took a picture with her. She's a little sweetheart. She's in her 80s. And this woman has interviewed, I'd like to have her on sometime as a guest. In fact, we'll try and do that in the future. But she's absolutely amazing. The research she has done and reporting with people in the military, people in various different areas about these different beings that are here and coming in and out of here. It's absolutely stunning. So, you know, we don't know what we don't know. And that's always a thing to keep in very humbly in mind. So anyways, some great comments. Oh, somebody's mentioning Linda Moulton Hall. Yeah, great author. She is an incredible lady. And I took a picture with her. Because, you know, you never know how long somebody's going to be around. But she's a little sweetheart, and she's really smart, really smart. And, you know, that gives us all encouragement. Here's a lady in her 80s, and I'm telling you, she's as sharp as a tack. And really, really like her. So anyways, yeah, I'll try and get her on as a guest someday. But yeah, people are talking about the open portals of CERN. You bet. If you think our military and our science black ops are not deeply into this stuff, tell you what, I think there's a lot more that went on in Iraq than we'll ever know. And a lot of that might have been portals. So then, and all this stuff that we hear about stargates and time gates might be a lot more true than we know. I know I've experienced things that have just been inexplicable. And again, this is why it's fascinating working with remote viewing groups. And I've had a lot of different people in those genres, both in the military and out. Well, I shouldn't say that, but they've been involved in the military. I'll just say that. But the bottom line is, what's interesting about all this is the whole space-time continuum of consciousness and time. This is what remote viewing is all about. You see, even astrology is a time machine because you can go forward and backwards. And the astrology is amazing. You can jump forward 200 years, and unless the solar system rearranges itself, that's where everything will be. You can actually go back thousands of years. And this is very relatable to what I talked about earlier, acoustics. Acoustics creates things called standing waves in certain spaces. This is why certain musical instruments have such incredible tonalities and sounds to them. And this actually works in electronics too. You can see certain people who are guitar players will notice certain pickups. Like you listen to Billy Gibbons on ZZ Top, or you listen to Eric Clapton, or these other guitars. Eddie Van Halen was totally into this. He would find these ways to get resonant sounds out of their instruments. Well, the same thing happens with astrology and us. We are literally like tuning forks, tuned by the karmic resonance that our birth chart shows. We are not our astrology. We are a reflection of it at where consciousness is at this point in time. It's really fascinating stuff to look into. And again, what's above that is our higher selves. And when we tap into that, really interesting stuff. So anyways, I love this. Someone saying most churches had bells. That's right. Bells, they say, chase away demonic forces. Remember little Zuzu? Every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings, right? So it's very interesting, that stuff. And yeah, there's a lot too. In fact, I have a good friend, Sotantar. He works at Jupiter Yoga down in Newport Beach. And he's an expert in sound and also in resonances. And again, sound, resonance, acoustics, and consciousness all go together. It's really interesting stuff. Very deep stuff to look at. And I think if we pay attention to that, I've actually got a bunch of tuning forks that are really interesting. And Camille gave them to me for my birthday. And they actually resonate with different elements of your consciousness, which is amazing stuff. So anyways, I've got to run. And a lot of people are mentioning certain things that they have with K2 in their divisional charts, right? See, in Vedic astrology, you can look at the harmonics of divisional charts. Now, Vedic astrologers call those Vargas. Vargas are harmonics of where the planets were in your birth chart. And that stuff is incredible, absolutely incredible. And the Western astrology has it too. They have it in what they call the Egyptian essential dignities. They're different, but you figure out astrology 100%, let me know. No one will. It is the code of angelic forces on the soul, and it really is. So with that, I got to run, but you all have a good weekend, and be careful with this Mercury retrograde. Don't live in fear, just live in awareness, and this also can be turned to a much more positive way where you focus, retrace, rethink, and re-examine what you're doing and how you're doing it. And it is a good idea to drive mighty careful, and even walking around. This is a time where you want to slow down and take it easy, especially as Mars hits those points I mentioned, which again is going to be November 12th, comes back on the 17th. And then, we'll get into the other ones later as time goes on. So, all right, you all take care, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.